Thanks. I'm one of those growing numbers of people since the election who can say now, I used to be a community organizer, and when I first went into that business just out of college, my mother said, you know, what is that job? And she didn't understand it. Now, of course, she wonders, why aren't you president? So, and I want to thank you, Peter, and also thank Michael Waldman and Laura McCleary and the rest of the staff of the Brennan Center for pulling us together. It's been a great day, and I know we have a little bit more to go, but it's been terrific to have people in this room at this moment. I actually disagree with Peter, and I'll say a little bit on this later, but I think now absolutely is the moment to win this kind of reform. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the updates in the public financing model, and then talk about how it changes the policy debate, I think, and also how it might change the actual conduct of campaigns and maybe affect politics more broadly, because I think that area hasn't been explored much, not just here, but more broadly. And I will stipulate at the beginning to satisfy Monica, who was admonishing advocates about what they say, that I believe these systems are absolutely help battle corruption and the perception of corruption. And I'll just stipulate that at the beginning, and then I'll talk about some other things in addition to that. No one here has actually mentioned how the public financing law that's being proposed for Congress would work. So let me just run through a little bit of the numbers and the dynamics of that law. And I apologize for, after sitting through a large number of lawyers, constitutional lawyers, to now move on to the even more exciting topic of numbers, but I'll be quick. Let's say a candidate, call her Jane Smith, wants to run under the Fair Elections Law. She qualifies by raising $1,500 qualifying contributions that have to add up to at least $50,000. Once qualified, she receives a check for her primary. If she wins that, she gets another check for the general. Along the way, and this is part of the refinement of the law from the previous version, if she chooses, she can continue to raise money from contributors of $100 or less, and those donations will be matched on a 4-to-1 basis, up to a ceiling amount of public money. The numbers work out as follows. The base grants total $900,000. There's an additional $1.8 million available for matching. When you combine the maximum public money with the qualifying funds and the small private matching donations that are required to raise the maximum amount, Jane's campaign has $3.3 million to spend, and under the current version of the law, another $100,000 in media vouchers. So that's a total of $3.4 million, plus anything the candidate or the campaign raise afterwards in $100 contributions, which are not subject to the limit from new people, gets added to that total. So there is no ceiling on what Jane can spend, but those later $100 or less contributions simply aren't matched. So that's a sizable amount of money for a campaign, and there's no lid on it. The Senate program follows the same kind of dynamic, but it's scaled to the particular size of the state. And when you look at what candidates would have to spend and what's being spent now, it matches up pretty well. The candidate who chooses this course can never take a private contribution of more than $100 from anyone during each of the 3 distinct phases of the program: the qualifying period, the primary period, and the general election. So it's a system that is entirely driven by small donations. And as I said, that's a notable change from the programs in Maine and Arizona and Connecticut. In those states, the small donor fundraising is all at the beginning, and the qualified candidates who want more money have to wait for their opponents to outspend them, or they have to be attacked by independent expenditures. When that happens, they get a $1-for-$1 matching check from the public fund with no additional engagement from small donors. I think the new policy will make for some difference in the arguments on public financing. I think, first of all, it really undercuts the argument that somehow public financing systems are an infringement on free speech. What the system does is magnify small donors' gifts through the campaign. It amplifies their speech. And the effective speech rights it magnifies the effective speech rights of those who can't make a $2,400 maximum contribution. And I'll say this, and this may violate the etiquette of this setting, but to the folks from the Center for Competitive Politics, to oppose this model of public financing is to oppose the expansion of political speech for millions of Americans. And I think it leaves the advocates of that position holding what is essentially the let-them-eat-cake position on speech, let them buy 30-second spots. But they've also been adding different kinds of attacks on top of the free speech arguments anyway, in what I think is ultimately sort of a contradictory and disingenuous way. Public financing, they say, is wasting public money on buttons and bumper stickers. So when a working-class, tax-paying Joe contributes $10 or $20 of his hard-earned paycheck to a fair elections candidate, and by that action steers another $40 or $80 of his government's money, and that's his government, right? It belongs to him. He steers it to the candidate of his individual choice. Well, the center would say that's a waste and shouldn't be allowed. But when a millionaire wants to intervene in elections by spending huge amounts of money, the campaigning bought with that money isn't a waste. Instead, it's free speech, and it's a right that should be defended at every turn. I think if our opponents on this issue were consistent about the value of political speech, they'd stop attacking fair elections and support that speech for everyone, just not those who can afford a large contribution. My larger point is that this model of public financing amplifies the voices of ordinary Americans within the political process. It makes candidates who choose public financing depend on a large number of ordinary Americans for the financial success of their campaigns. And as Reverend Yearwood said on the first panel this morning, that it turns the current paradigm in which successful candidates for Congress must depend on the relatively few who can make large contributions, completely on its head. And I think this will have consequences, good ones, for the conduct of campaigns and potentially more broadly for politics as well. From what we know about the qualifying process in the fair elections type systems in Maine and Arizona, that's the beginning when they collect all the small donations that they need to get public financing, it's much more of a campaign field exercise than something comparable to a fundraising exercise. It's driven by house parties, door knocking, and solicitation by mail to people they know, the candidates know. And the people they reach out to are often engaged in other activities on behalf of the campaign, putting up a lawn sign, volunteering at headquarters, attending events, and so on. And from what we've heard about the Obama's campaign success in fundraising, engaging these small givers is key to engage them in multiple ways, not just giving money, but in other activities, I guess including scrubbing the floors of the office for people who heard Norm speaking earlier. The Fair Elections Program ramps this up. It pushes candidates hard to organize large numbers of people into the campaign, steering the campaign to constantly meet new people and bring them in if they want to be financially successful. If you believe that an engaged citizenry is essential to democracy, then this system has much to offer. And while we shouldn't just think about this from the candidate and the campaign's point of view, imagine you're active in your local community. You're the officer of the PTA, an officer of the PTA, or you sit on the board of a local community organization, or you coach in the local Little League, or you're active in the Kiwanis Club, or maybe you're just big on Facebook or LinkedIn, or keep a really big email list. So whatever your form of social networking, you have the potential in this program to play the same role as one of those bundlers who can pack a room with $2,400 givers. This system turns social capital into political capital and has the potential to make political leaders out of our community leaders, and I mean political in the best and most honorable and hopeful sense of that word. So I'm getting near the end of my allotted time here, but let me just say that I think, and I'll say this to Peter, I think, and maybe we can go into this further, I think now is absolutely the moment to move this policy. We have leadership on our bills from top congressional figures in the majority party. We have a friend in the White House. We have a public that just voted for change in Washington and is already being underscored in the issue battles of the day. You can't change this city without going after the money. So let's win this one and win it soon. Thanks.